Assalamu alaikum students. So this is lecture number 33 and it's about the Victorian era. In the previous lecture, I gave you a description of Matthew Arnold's life and important works. And as I told you, when we study a critic, so we have to study his life, means some important aspects of his life, and his age is very important, and then his work. So now we are going to discuss. I'll tell you about his age, and inshallah we'll have discussion about his age as well. So it was the Victorian era, and it was definitely marked by many things. The Victorian era is known by the name of Queen Victoria. So Victorian era in British history is a period between approximately 1820 and 1914, corresponding roughly, but not exactly to the period of Queen Victoria's reign. She started reigning. Here you can say in the history is a period you can say that exactly the period of Queen Victoria's reign from 1837 to 1901. This is a period which is called Victorian era, and before this period, we have Romantic movement or Romanticism, and after this period, 1901, we see the rise of modernism, pre-modern era. So it is characterized by a class-based society. Remember, in Victorian era, there were three classes: upper class, middle class, and lower class. And middle class was rising. It was a time when middle class was rising very rapidly, and they were industrialists. They were running industries, and lower class, they were going down day by day, and they were injustice, inequality were committed very common to them. Upper class, they were just living their own life, they were just enjoying their own life. So a growing state and economy, it was a time when the economy was rising very quickly, state was growing, and Britain's status as the most powerful empire in the world. Remember, it was a time when they had the most powerful empire in the world. तकरीबन आधी दुनिया और अच्छी खासी दुनिया पे उनकी हुक्मरानी और उन्हें की ये वो वक्त था, ये वो दौर था. They were also here in subcontinent, and if you remember, after 1857 they totally occupied this continent. Before this they were here as a trader. Then East India Company was demised, and then they started their rule here in subcontinent as well. If you talk about religion in the Victorian world, so we find most Victorian Britons were Christian. The Anglican churches of England, Wales, Ireland, they were the state churches and dominated the religious landscape. It was also a time when people were asking questions about religion. They were not accepting things as they were. They had to accept in the previous eras. They were asking questions, they were raising questions. The Church of Scotland was Presbyterian, and there was some religious diversity as Britain also was home to other non-Anglican Protestants. ब्रिटेन में और भी नॉन एंग्लिकन प्रोटेस्टेंट रहते थे, रोमन कैथोलिक्स रहते थे, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, and others. And at the end of the period, it is has been reported that there were even a few atheists as well. So, from religious point of view, the Victorian world, the Victorian British Empire, as I told you in two slides, it was a time when Britain had their empire, and they had the strongest empire in the world. उनकी एक बड़ी सल्तनत थी. They occupied. They were here in subcontinent. In subcontinent India. That time there was no existence of Pakistan. So India and current Pakistan, Sri Lanka, current Bangladesh, and many other Nepal and many other countries were occupied by them. Burma and all such countries, and then African part of countries. Even there were some, uh, I think, Arab countries which were also under their occupation. So the Victorian British Empire dominated the globe through, though its forms of rule and influence were uneven and diverse. The traffic of people and goods between Britain and its colonies was, and they were the colonies of Britain. They were the colonies of Britain. The traffic of people and goods between Britain and its colonies was constant, complex, and multi-directional. Britain shaped the empire shaped Britain, and colonies shaped one another. And British jobs abroad included civil and military service, missionary work, and infrastructure development. People from various imperial locations traveled to studied in and settled in Britain because they were earning money. They were having, actually they were having those kind of, you can say, things which are happening in our country, in our society nowadays. People are getting more and more opportunities. They are leaving villages and coming to cities and settling in cities for education and for good jobs and for good futures. The same thing was happening in Victorian era. What is happening in our country now? So if we compare our country with Britain, so we can find that we are very much behind them in this case. The things which were happening 200 years ago with them, or 150 years with them, the same things we are having now. Now Britain has become a very strong country and nation, and financially, and then, of course, no one can say anything else about their financial position, and from educational point of view and from other points of view. So it was a time when they had great the empire under the um, rule of Queen Victoria. किसी को इस हवाले से कुछ पूछना हो तो पूछ सकते हैं. इट इज़ अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट. याद रखिए, अगर आपको एज का नहीं पता तो आपको बहुत सी चीज़ों में पता नहीं चलेगा. इफ़ यू स्टडी नॉवल एंड इफ़ यू स्टडी ऑल सच थिंग्स, सो यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड, बिकॉज देयर नॉवलिस्ट are not talking about nature. They are not talking about only nature, seas, imagination. Their novelists are talking about their society. They are talking about the things which are happening in their society. So they are talking about the real things or facts. Charles Dickens is a very good example of uh, whose novels are the novels of social reform. Any question regarding this part?
सर एक्सक्यूज मी.
Yes, yes.
सर क्वीन विक्टोरिया तो खुद भी क्वीन थी, लेकिन फिर भी इस एज में मतलब फीमेल राइटर्स के लिए बहुत सी वो थी, मतलब उनके लिए मुश्किलात थी. तो
Hmm.
उन्होंने एज अ फीमेल उनके लिए कुछ नहीं किया, मतलब खवातीन उस जमाने में काफी पीछे थी, बैकवर्ड थी.
Actually, as I told you that they were very conservative. That time they were very conservative, and as I told you that whatever the queen said, they had to follow. There were many individuals, they did not agree that they had the right to rule, their colonies as they were ruling, right? Why? Because they said that they were born to rule the world. तो उन्होंने कहा कि ये कोई, we are not born to rule the world, we all are equal. So there were many individuals. One of the example we have, if you remember, Passage to India के जो writer है उसने भी इस चीज़ को highlight किया. So but they were not allowed actually, and they whatever the queen said they had to follow. So they were very conservative that time, and there were many things which were considered, you can say, taboo in Victorian era, and the same things started to be considered all right, started to be considered normal in modern era after First World War and after Victorian era. Especially after First World War, those things started to be considered wrong, normal. So in Victorian era, they had certain social barriers and certain things, and they had restricted things. Thomas Hardy is one of the novelists who was writing in the late Victorian era, and he was banned from writing novels because of his one novel, and later on he started writing poetry. और आज की दुनिया आप देख लें तो आज तो वहाँ पे सब कुछ, एवरीथिंग इज कैन बी डन एंड ऑल आर फ्री टू एक्सप्रेस वट एवर दे वांट, whether good or bad. So there were certain things. Victorian dresses, if you see, they are ladies' dresses, so they are very complete dresses, dressing, and they wear long frocks, and they have traditions. We have the example of, but there are many other problems. Any other question?
यस सर.
Okay, science in Victorian world. If we see the developments, of course, we can see over there rail, you know, rail system started in Victorian era properly. Industrial revolution was there. Industrial revolution though started earlier, but it was at its peak in Victorian era. And due to this thing, what happened that they needed raw materials. They needed raw material, and for this purpose, they started, going to other countries, and they where they went, they made those countries their colonies, and they started getting raw material from those countries, and they started producing things, and they had number of factories and industries. So industrial revolution तो वहीं से फिर उठा, and villages, people started migrating from villages to cities, and they started working from 12, 14, 16 hours, and there was also child labor and many other such, injustice or inequality were very common. So it was a time of middle class. Middle class were, making money, minting money. People became materialistic. आपको इस तरह की चीजें मिलेंगी due to the advancement of all science and all such thing. People became materialistic. They had no time for their family members. So, alongside their faith, Victorians made and appreciated developments in science. The best known Victorian scientific development is that of the theory of evolution. It is typically credited to Charles Darwin, but versions of it were developed by earlier thinkers as well. And the pseudoscience of eugenics was an ugly outgrowth of Victorian evolutionary theory. Victorians were also fascinated by the emerging discipline of psychology and the physics of energy. Yeah, any question regarding this? Then there were some other characteristics of this age as well. There are some other characteristics of this age as well. When you study it in details, you will find them. Unequal distribution of wealth. As we can see, even this characteristic or this thing today in the world, that on one hand you will find people are millionaires or billionaires. They have a lot of money, a lot of facilities and all such things, big houses and all such things they are enjoying. And on the other hand, you'll find there are people who are so poor that they don't have proper dresses to wear. They don't have homes. They live even on the roads, on the footpath, or they live in very small huts. They have no proper education. They don't have even two times, proper meals, and they're living from hand to mouth. Even if we see our neighboring country India, we find that on one hand there are people who have plenty of money and very lavish lifestyle. On the other hand, you'll find families are living on the footpath. They are living on the roads, and they are not they don't have even, men don't have proper kameez, and very terrible situation. So this is called unequal distribution of wealth. You can see nowadays a cricketer is earning a lot of money, and a teacher or professor is not earning that much money. A cricketer, so don't it means that we should make our children cricketer. Why? Because they have a very good future if they become cricketers. So on the other hand, if you see, doctors, nurses, teachers, professors, they are not highly paid. They are not paid as, sportsmen are paid. So actually, this is what we call unequal distribution of wealth, and this is something that was happening in Victorian era. Laborers were, you know, paid low wages उनको पे किए जाते थे, and they had to work from morning to night, and terrible condition, जो factories वगैरह की conditions थी internal, वो अच्छी नहीं हुआ करती थी. And this is something you can find has been highlighted by Charles Dickens in his novel. Charles Dickens के novels को इसलिए कहा जाता है, his novels are called the novels of social reform. Any question regarding this first point? यस, आप लोग पूछा करें, अगर कुछ प्रॉब्लम हो तो पूछ लिया करें. बाद में चीज़ें इतनी ध्यान में नहीं रहती हैं. अभी आप अगर पूछेंगे तो थिंग्स विल गेट क्लियर. ये सब चीज़ें रेलेवेंट है, इनमें इररेलेवेंट कुछ भी नहीं है. Rise of middle class. If we study Matthew Arnold's essay, social. If we study Matthew Arnold as a social critic, so we can study Matthew Arnold as a cultural anarchy, in which Matthew Arnold has given a very good picture of his society, in which he has divided his society, Miss Victorian society, into three classes: uh, upper class, middle class, and lower class. And he has designated different names. Upper class को उसको नाम दिया aristocrat, middle class को उसने नाम दिया uh, मिडिल क्लास को नाम दिया, नाम जहन से निकल गए मेरे, और लोअर क्लास को उसने नाम दिया फेलेस्टीन्स का, अपर क्लास को उसने बारबेरियंस का, he called them barbarians, and middle class he called them, I just forgot, जहन से निकल गया, and the lower class he called them Philistines, right? So middle class, he said that he was himself from middle class, and he said that it was a time of middle class. They were rising rapidly, they were financially becoming strong, but unfortunately they were materialistic. Materialistic means they became money minded, and money was a kind of god for them. They used to consider everything in terms of money, in terms of business, money, and all such thing. Human relationships and human, feelings were nothing to them. And this is something seriously hurt Matthew Arnold as well. And he wrote Culture and Anarchy, in which he has mentioned these things. और उसमें उसने बात करता है, एक जगह तो बहुत बेचारा जज्बाती भी हो गया था, जिसमें उसने कहा, इसमें कुछ लाइंस जिसने बार बार रिपीट भी की इस वजह से कि भाई, एवरीथिंग इज नॉट मशीनरी, इज नॉट everything. We should give time to our family members, we should have time for our relationship as well, we should also enjoy our life. So this is the time of middle class. Lower class means working. Lower class were working class, they were running the wheels of the factory, but they were being treated very unfairly, badly. दे वर पेड वेरी लो वेजेस, और बच्चों से भी मेहनत करवाया करवाया जाता था, खाने को प्रॉपर खाना, प्रॉपर चीज़ें नहीं दी जाती थी. आज भी अगर आप थोड़ा सा घूम फिर लें इन आर कंट्री, सो यू इन आर कंट्री और इन इंडिया, in Bangladesh, in some underdeveloped countries, you will find that child labor is also very common there. Though we have some rules and regulations, but no one or very few people follow those rules and regulations. Child labor आपको मिलेगा गैराज में, दुकानों में मजदूरी करते हुए आपको बच्चे मिलेंगे, खवातीन मिलेंगी, और बेचा, और दे आर पेड वेरी लो वेजेस, बहुत कम उनको तनख्वाहें दी जाती हैं, एंड दे आर even beaten sometime if they don't, if they make any mistake, which are all against the ethics and which are all against human rights. Any question regarding this second point, rise of middle class?
सर एक्सक्यूज मी,
Yes.
सर ऐसा तो जैसे नहीं है कि अगर हम लोग मतलब कोई भी एज होती है, अगर हम लोग फाइनेंशियली ऊपर जाते हैं तो हम मतलब इखलाकी तौर पे जो भी वो माशरा होते हैं वो फिर नीचे मतलब हमारी इखलाकियात आ जाती हैं.
Yes, very good point. You are very absolutely right. But actually, it is also it depends on our thought as well. You are right that when we go very rapidly, or when we go when we become financially better, so it happens that we sometimes lose our moral values. So these things happened in Victorian era, and these things you can find even in today's world. You can see nowadays we are using technology, and for this purpose, what is happening, our expenses have increased to a great extent. And in order to meet these expenses, what happened that we work from morning to night, and that is why we are unable to give time to our family members, we are unable to give time to our children. When we can't give time to them, so how can we give time to, or how can we find time for our relatives, our neighbors? We don't have such social gathering which we used to have 20 or 15 years back. आप लोग अपने वालिद मोहतरम से पूछिएगा, या अपने घर वालों से पूछिएगा, जो बड़े हैं उनसे पूछिएगा, तो वो बताएंगे कि माजी में एक साथ बैठते थे, और उनके मतलब दुख सुख जो थे वो एक शेयर करते थे, और शादियों में कभी एक बहुत अच्छा सिस्टम था, और हर मतलब एक किस्म की गैदरिंग हुआ करती थी. अब वो नहीं है. अब मैंने कई जगह देखा भाई, फेसबुक के ज़रिए या वो ताज़ियत भी कर ली. किसी का इंतकाल हुआ भाई, फेसबुक पे से कहते हैं मेरे अब्बू का इंतकाल हो गया, वहीं पे ताज़ियत कर लिया, अल्लाह ताला जन्नत बख्शे और मगफिरत फरमाए. सब लोग जाते ही कम है अब, ठीक है. और लोगों के पास टाइम भी नहीं होता, नौकरी से छुट्टी नहीं मिलती है, नौकरी नहीं करेंगे तो घर नहीं चलेंगे, घर के किराए इतने ज़्यादा हैं, दुकानें हैं, ताजिर है तो ताजिर दुकानदार के किरायों से को पूरा करना मुश्किल होता है. तो ये क्या है कि वी हैव बिकम मटेरियलिस्टिक. Now we have only one goal. What is that goal? To earn as much money as possible, so that we can फुलफिल आवर नीड्स। तो ये चीज़ें उस वक्त थी। अब तो इंग्लैंड वो फाइनेंशियली बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग है, अब उनमें ये चीज़ें नहीं है, लेकिन उस वक्त इनमें ये चीज़ें थी। अब वो मोरली बहुत ही ज़्यादा करप्ट हो चुके हैं, मीन्स यूरोप पूरा ही मोरली करप्ट है आपके सामने। ठीक है, सो यू हैव raised a very good point. So when we financially become stable, so we face this problem that we lose or we start losing our moral values. Any other question? और कोई इसके हवाले से? दिस इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट विच यू हैव रेज्ड। बहुत अहम आपने पॉइंट उठाया, और जब आप नॉवेल्स पढ़ेंगे तो आपको ये चीज़ें बहुत मिलेंगी उसमें। देखिए, कॉन्टेक्स्ट से पता होना जरूरी है। अगर आप कोई लिटरेचर पढ़ रहे हैं, आपको कॉन्टेक्स्ट का नहीं पता, तो फिर आपको समझ में क्या आएगा? ये मैं आपसे पूछ रहा हूँ, व्हाट यू विल अंडरस्टैंड इफ यू डोंट नो अबाउट द कॉन्टेक्स्ट। कॉन्टेक्स्ट मीन्स अबाउट द एज। क्योंकि टी एस एलियट कहता है कि अ राइटर इज नॉट अ राइटर एट ऑल इफ ही डजंट राइट अबाउट हिज एज। वो तो रोमांटिक्स को राइटर नहीं मानता, बोलते उन्होंने तो अपनी एज के बारे में कुछ बताया नहीं है, सिर्फ नेचर नेचर। चलो नेचर की एक चीज़ है, वी मस्ट बी क्लोज टू नेचर, वी मस्ट, बट इट इज़ नॉट एवरीथिंग। इसकी मिसाल ऐसे, जो आजकल के जो राइटर्स हैं वो फिल्म बनाते हैं तो उसमें सिर्फ लव को बोलते हैं, लव इज एवरीथिंग। इन रियल लाइफ लव इज नॉट एवरीथिंग, इट इज वन ऑफ द एलिमेंट्स ऑफ आवर लाइफ, बट इट्स नॉट एवरीथिंग। That is why I think a large number of love marriages fail. Why? Because love is not something that give us bread and butter. It's not something that fulfills our needs. It's not something that will pay our house rent and other things, that will pay our educational expenses. Love is something that is one element. But modern writers, you see that they only show love, and love between not even husband and wife, love between two couples, which has nothing to do with the real life, which is something that spoils generation. Any question? जल्दी बताए, टाइम हमारे पास कम है। इफ यू हैव एनी क्वेश्चन यू कैन आस्क मी।
नो सर।
इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन काफ़ी हद तक डिस्कस कर चुका हूँ। इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन वही है कि दे वर दे industries started and they needed raw material, and for that purpose they used to travel different countries, and where they went as a trader। यहाँ पे भी वो ताजर के तौर पे आए थे। अगर आपको याद हो कि हमने किताबों में पढ़ा कि they came as a trader in the beginning, and when they saw, you know when they saw that we when they saw that we were just, you know busy, uh, enjoying our life for nothing, we were just, doing wrong things. So they saw our actually shortcomings, they saw our shortcomings, and they saw our weaknesses, and they then got advantage of that weaknesses। और उनका फार्मूला क्या था? डिवाइड एंड रूल। तो उन्होंने हमें डिवाइड किया, उसके बाद रूल किया। तो बहैसियत ताजिर वो हर जगह गए, और उसके बाद वहाँ के लोग उनकी वीकनेसेस को देख कर उससे फ़ायदा उठाया और अपना जहन चलाया। सो इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन की वजह से ही हुआ है कि उन्होंने सोचा कि अब हमें अपने इस लैंड से, अपने आइलैंड से आगे भी जाना चाहिए, सो दैट वी कैन गेट things। Inequality, I have just told you that there was, of course, unequal distribution of wealth and unequal distribution of other things as well, so it was an inequality। Materialism means there were money minded people, Victorian people, public was, or Victorian, people, you will find middle class was rising, and they were materialistic means हर चीज़ को पैसे को तनाजे में देखना। आज भी आप देखें तो आज भी आपको ये नज़र आएगा, जैसे if you go for uh, you know match means, what should I say here, अगर लड़की के रिश्ते के लिए भी जाते हैं तो उसमें भी हम यही पूछते हैं कि लड़के की तनख्वाह कितनी है। किरदार के बारे में कोई पूछता भी नहीं, ना ही जानने की ज़रूरत महसूस करता है। अगर बुरा भी होगा तो बोलेंगे चलो ठीक हो जाएगा बाद में। तनख्वाह कितनी है, आमदनी कितनी है, अमीर कितना, ये चीज़ देखी जाएगी। इसी तरह से हम उन्हीं लोगों की इज़्ज़त ज़्यादा करते हैं जो पैसे वाले होते हैं, जिनके पास पैसा होता है। और अगर कोई शख्स बहुत तालीम याफ्ता है लेकिन पैसे में कम है, पैसा उसके पास कम है, तो इसकी इज़्ज़त भी कम की जाती है। हम कहीं जाएं, अगर कोई अच्छे कपड़े पहन के जाएं या महंगी गाड़ी में जाएंगे, सो वी आर गिवन लॉट ऑफ रिस्पेक्ट। बट if we go on motorcycle, or if we wear normal dresses, so people give us less respect। So this is called materialism, means when you are giving respect because of money, because of social status, because of expensive things, so, and you're not giving respect because of that person's education, because of that person knowledge, so it means that it is materialism, and this is something that was in that particular age, and this is something we have nowadays as well। And that is why what happens, that we lose faith, our faith becomes very weak, हमारा जो ईमान है वो कमज़ोर हो जाता है, और फिर उसके बाद इस तरह के मसाइल शुरू हो जाते हैं। Any question regarding this? So these are the characteristics of Victorian era। Remember, Victorian public was very fond of reading, and that's why the most popular form of literature in Victorian era is novel. Novel is the most popular form of literature in Victorian era, and then we find poetry. So Victorian public were so fond of reading that they used to read even novels in at bus stop, in the buses. बसों में बस स्टॉप में आपको आम से लोग मिलेंगे, एंड एजुकेशन वाज मेड compulsory for Victorian public. Though education state of education was not good, but it was made compulsory for them. Any question? Okay, major novelists of Victorian era. We see Charles Dickens' name is at the top of the list, and he's considered he's also considered a social reformer, and his work is considered to be a social reform. His novels are considered to be the novels of social reform. So his through his novels, he wanted to point out the cruelties, oppressions, and injustice, inequality to the people that these things were happening. He talked about child labor. He talked about the poor class of the society. He talked about the laborers and all these things you'll find with Charles Dickens. Then William Thackeray. Three Bronte sisters were very active as well. George Eliot was very active, and you will find later part Thomas Hardy. He was also very active, but later on he was banned from writing novel. Any question? इनमें से गालिबन आपने कुछ को तो पढ़ा होगा, चार्ल्स डिकन को तो लाजमी पढ़ा होगा.
सर वो चार्ल्स डिकेन का ओलिवर ट्विस्ट भी इस हवाले से बहुत अच्छा नॉवेल है.
ओलिवर ट्विस्ट हो गया, और इसके अलावा उसने फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन पे भी बनाया. उस क्या कहते हैं उस पे चाइल्ड लेबर के वाले से भी बनाया. सो लिखा है इसने. सो ही वाज एक्चुअली सोशल रिफॉर्मर. He was as I told you that the form of literature which he used was novel. He was not a poet. So these are different forms of literature: poetry, prose, novel, fiction, essays. These all are the forms of literature. So इसको हम चार्ल्स पढ़ेंगे, चार्ल्स नहीं पढ़ेंगे, चार्ल्स. ठीक है, चार्ल्स डिकन्स. Any other question? We are running out of time. If you have any other questions, please ask me regarding this. Major poets, if we see the major poets, we can find the name of Sir Alfred Tennyson at the top of the list. He was considered to be a complete representative of that era. So Tennyson, Matthew Arnold, who we are studying as a critic, he was also a great poet and a critic both. And then Sir Robert Browning, a very interesting and very renowned figure of this Victorian era, and of course his dramatic monologues are very very famous. Trends in Victorian novel. If you saw, trends, since novel was the most important literary form, so that's why I'm just giving you a little, you can say, information about trends in Victorian novel. किसी को पता है इस हवाले से कुछ? What were the trends in Victorian novel? Just share your knowledge with me without any hesitation. It will be very positive for you. No? Okay. Loose and ill constructed plot. Victorian. When we study Victorian novels, of course, through novels, they were trying to bring reform in the society. So, loose and ill constructed plot, you'll find there. Before this, I would like to tell you that in Victorian era, the novel of social reform we can see with Charles Dickens, and you'll find that he was the first English novelist who consciously used the novel form to focus public attention on the many social evils prevalent in his age. In this way, he tried to cure some of these evils which caused great suffering to the poor. He rendered great service to society and contributed much to the well-being of the underdog of society. His one wish and hope was, वो क्या कहता था? He wanted to strike a blow for the poor, and many such blows he did strike. Right, mainly many of the social ills of the day come within the last lash of Dickens. Dickens ने काफी उनको तनकीद भी किया. The various evils of industrial revolution, especially the employment of child labor, खास तौर पर जो child labor जो था उसके खिलाफ इसने बात की. And he had been the child labor have been highlighted through the suffering of such children as David Copperfield. David Copperfield is a very good example, and through the suffering of David Copperfield, he is highlighting the child labor employed in various industrial establishments. There were no factory laws and trade unions, and so the factory owners were free. ना कोई factory law था, ना कोई trade union था, जिसकी वजह से they were free to exploit tender children for their own profit. तो बच्चों का जिस तरह से भी चाहते थे इस्तेमाल करते थे. डेविड गोज टू वर्क एट द टेंडर एज ऑफ 10, और वो भी डेविड कॉपरफील्ड, अगर आपको पता हो नॉवेल एक है चार्ल्स डिकन की, वेरी फेमस नॉवेल. तो उसमें वो डेविड जो होता है वो 10 साल की उम्र में काम के लिए जाता है. एंड ही वर्क्स फ्रॉम अर्ली इन द मॉर्निंग टिल लेट इन द नाइट इन द मोस्ट अनहेल्दी एंड सफोकेटिंग एनवायरमेंट. He is paid only 6 or 7 shilling a week, hardly enough to provide him with 2 full meals a day. The result is he suffered terribly, and David's suffering is the suffering of a man, a poor and helpless Victorian child. ठीक है, तो ये चीज़ें आपको मिलेंगी एज अ सोशल रिफॉर्मर. एक्स्ट्रा ऑर्डनरी मिक्सचर ऑफ सेंटिमेंट्स आपको इससे मिलेंगे. लाइफलेस कैरेक्टर्स मिलेंगे. कॉम्प्रीहेंसिव पिक्चर्स ऑफ कंटेम्प्रेरी लाइफ. विक्टोरियन नॉवेलिस्ट इज अ मैन ऑफ वेरियड मूड्स. क्रिएटिव इमेजिनेशन भी आपको मिलेंगी. ठीक है, इसमें इस नॉवल, इस तरह के नॉवेल्स में यूनिफॉर्मिटी की आपको कमी नज़र आएगी इसमें. एंड plot is generally loose and ill-constructed. As I've told you, the main outline in this is the same. The story contains of a large variety of character and incident clustering around the figure of the hero. These characters and incidents are connected together rather loosely by an intrigue, and the story ends with the ringing of wedding bells. So, the Victorian novels is an extraordinary mixture of sentiment, melodrama, and lifeless characters, because they were depicting society, क्योंकि society को depict कर रहे थे. There is much that is improbable and artificial in character and incident. Any question regarding this?
सर एक्सक्यूज मी.
Yes.
सर इसका ये मतलब है ना, जैसे टू द पॉइंट बात नहीं होती थी, जैसे आजकल जो है ना हम लोग स्टोरी के ही गेट घूमते हैं.
Yes.
बाकी जो हमारा प्लॉट होता है उसमें हम सोशल या कोई और किस्म के प्रॉब्लम्स के बारे में ज्यादा नहीं डिस्कस करते. और उस जमाने में जो राइटर्स होते थे तो वो सारी जो सोशल इश्यूज होते थे सबकी लेके चलते थे, तो वहाँ पे कैरेक्टर्स भी ज्यादा होते थे और स्टोरीज भी उनमें ज्यादा होती
Yeah,
थी.
because they were just depicting their society. So in society, you'll find countless characters and countless problems. तो वो उनको हाईलाइट करते करते ना प्लॉट की तरफ तवज्जो इनकी नहीं जाती थी. एक चीज़ को डिस्कस करें तो 2-3 चीज़ें और बीच में आ गई. तो इस तरह से आपको, अब डेविड कॉपरफील्ड आप देख लें, जो आप नॉवल बता रही है, तो उनको आप पढ़ेंगे, यू विल फेस दिस प्रॉब्लम देयर, because they are talking about, they are telling us about their society. Romantics की तरह नहीं है, they were just confined to certain things, or the romantics were also free in this case, but they were only confined to nature. But new classical writers जो थे, they confined themselves to certain things. तो प्लॉट की जो है वो थोड़ी आपको लूज प्लॉट मिलेंगे. सीक्वेंस ऑफ द स्टोरीज, स्टोरी विल नॉट फाइंड प्रॉपरली. क्रिएटिव इमेजिनेशन का आपको इसमें मिलेगा, because when we are free, so we can write with creative imagination, and when we are bound, then we lose this creative uh, impulse, or we can lose this thing. So the Victorians are all able to make their characters in them. That is improbable and false, but they were amazingly and indomitably alive. They were wonderfully energetic and vital, and they were all individuals living their own existence, lingering long in the memory once we have formed an acquaintance with them. So Victorian had this advantage. A Victorian novel is a crowded canvas, crowded with living, breathing individuals. आपको उसमें तरह तरह के कैरेक्टर्स मिलेंगे विक्टोरियन नॉवेल्स में, और ऐसे में भी कैरेक्टर्स मिलेंगे जो एक ही मरतबा आपने देखा होगा, उसके बाद दोबारा आपको नज़र भी नहीं आएगा. तो इसीलिए इसमें कहा जाता है कि विक्टोरियन नॉवल लैक्स यूनिफॉर्मिटी, एक्सट्रीमली अनइक्वल है इसमें. इट इज़ एन एक्स्ट्राऑर्डिनरी मिक्सचर ऑफ स्ट्रेंथ एंड वीकनेस बोथ. इट इज़ टेक्निकली फॉल्टी, यानी कि टेक्निकली आप इसको फॉल्टी कहेंगे, बिकॉज इट इज स्टिल इट्स इन फैंसी, considered as a light entertainment and not a serious work of art, and the laws of being have not and the laws of its being have not yet evolved. तो इसमें आपको थोड़ा ये फॉल्ट नजर आएगा, ये प्रॉब्लम नजर आएगी. इज दिस क्लियर? एनी क्वेश्चन?
नो सर.
Okay, now I will. You have only 2 minutes, and after 2 minutes, I will. Our second session will end. Unfortunately, हमारे यहाँ light time के अलावा चली गई. And as you know, I was not expecting this thing. थोड़ी morning में तबीयत ठीक नहीं थी. So light, is something that we don't have right now, and my laptop